In a previous video I talked about the module graph in webpack, which is a graph of modules that describe the connections between the modules. So if one module imports another, there will be an arrow from one module pointing to the module that it imports. In this video I would like to talk about the ChunkGraph, or in other words, how chunks are created, because chunk, the concept of a chunk, is a fundamental one in webpack. Before going any further, let's clarify a bit what a chunk is. For that I will also point you to one of my articles, but the summary is that a chunk is a resulting file of the bundling process. This means that a chunk will contain modules, and chunks can also be integrated into other chunks, as it is the case of lazy loading. And one last note is about how chunks can be created. One way would be to let webpack do it for you, and it will do it depending on some configuration options. And some other ways would be to use the import function and to provide an entry item to that entry property. But we'll see it just now, because I have prepared a small project here. So the config is this one. So as I've told you just a few seconds ago, by declaring an option or by adding a new entry or a new item to the entry object, we will automatically have a chunk, and this is done by webpack, of course. But what we can tell at this point is that at the end we will have for sure two chunks, because we have two entries in the entry object. Another way to create chunks, as I've said, would be to use the import function. Notice that the import function is different from a simple import statement, which is also known as harmony import in webpack. So as I said, this import function will create a new chunk. So as many import functions we will have, that number will also indicate the number of resulting chunks. Now I won't bother you with going through all of these imports, because I have prepared a small diagram here, which would mean to be the module graph. But although it is not on par with the actual module graph, it is enough for us to understand what's going on and how chunks are created from this module graph, because the chunk graph will have the module graph as its main starting point. So as I've showed you before, in the config file we have two entries, so we will have two modules here. And notice that I've annotated the arrow with an entry, which will indicate that those two modules are basically these ones here. Now one quick note about how this will happen. So at this point it might be simple to think that it is not such a big deal going on, because when you see an import, then this will mean a chunk. Here we have another import, which will mean another chunk, and so on. And if we do the maths, we will end up with 6 chunks, which is correct. But I want to highlight some inner concepts, some internal concepts of webpack, because as you will probably see, it is not that simple to achieve this let's say concept that looks simple. So webpack, what we'll do first and foremost will be to parse the entire application so that it will know all of the modules, because webpack has to know the modules first. And by parsing a module, which essentially means to parse that file that corresponds to the module, webpack will know how to build the module graph. And whenever webpack, with the help of the parser, will see an import function, webpack will know that it will have to do something special to differentiate this import function from the import statement. But again, this is all webpack magic. But I just wanted you to know that first of all, webpack will parse the entire project so that it will determine the modules. Then based on the modules, it will build the module graph, which is this one here. Next, in order to build the chunk graph, or in other words, to create the chunks, webpack will have to essentially perform a depth-first search in a non-recursive way, because it may lead to Stack Overflow. So it will perform a DFS or DFS on the module graph, and this is how chunks are created. But there is one more thing that I would like to mention, which is that, for example, if we are at index.js, and let's assume that we have a queue here, just to make things a bit more interactive. Let's say that we have a queue here. First, it will start with index.js and with utils, because these two modules are the entries. So the chunk graph construction will start with the entry modules. And as I've said before, and as you've seen, we have only two entry modules, which are index and utils.js. So this is the starting point of building the chunk graph. It will first pick index.js, and it will try to see in this module information what the imports are and what the dynamic imports are. And one very important thing is that webpack will traverse first the harmony imports, or the simple imports, or the standard imports, as you want to call it, them, which are these ones. So webpack will traverse first in a depth first manner the harmony imports. So at this point, let's say that index.js has been popped off the queue. Then it will see that, okay, it has imported utils.js, and then it will traverse utils.js until it has no more imports. And if, let's say, index.js had another file, let's say, for the lack of a better name, I will call it foo.js, then it will traverse foo.js, and it will traverse its dependencies, and then their dependencies, and so on. But keep in mind that those dependencies, those modules, will have to be imported by the simple or the standard import statement. Then after let's say this module has been traversed, or let's say that for this module index.js, all of the simple modules, all that have been imported with the import statement, have been traversed. Then for this index modules, it will consider those dependencies that have been referenced by the import function. And now the queue will have, let's also say that this utils.js has also been traversed. And now the queue will contain these two modules. Now it will take A. It will, if a.js would have another, let's say, imported module with the import statement, it will traverse that first, and so on. I think you have gotten the idea. And now it will encounter a.one.js, which will be added here, because the queue does not have any other type of modules, only modules that have been imported with the import function. Okay, now it will consider B. It will see that we have utils.js, which is a simple module, or a module that has been imported with the import statement or Harmony import. Then the queue will look like this. Also, I know this name queue is a bit misleading because under the hood there is not actually a queue, but webpack has done a very clever thing of not performing the DFS in a recursive manner. So it has been named in the source code as queue, so that's why I've chosen this name here. But anyway, coming back to this, this b.js has two imports, one dynamic and one static, and this b1.js will be put in a delayed queue, let's call it like that. And after after B has been processed, from this queue it will not pick A1, because A1, notice here, has been referenced by an import function. It will take utils.js because of b.js, and then it will traverse this one. In reality, it will not traverse it again because it has been seen before, because utils.js is also a dependency for index, as you see here, but that's another story. But what I want what I want you to take away from this is that those modules that have been imported with the Harmony import or a simple import will be traversed first in a DFS manner. Those that have been imported with the import function will be delayed, will be traversed after all of the other imports, all of the other static imports have been traversed. So coming back to our example, in this case for utils, after it has been traversed, it will traverse b1.js, because right now we are at B, we have traversed this one, and in the queue we have no more other modules other than those that have been imported with the import function. So it will take B1 and the process will carry on. And in the end, after all of this work, we will end up with a ChunkGraph that looks like this. Let's also bring those together to make it a bit easier to understand. So this is the resulting ChunkGraph, and these green rectangles are the chunks. As you can see, the index chunk will contain two modules. There is a separate chunk for utils because utils.js has been declared as a dependency. Then we have a chunk for each import, for each dynamic import, and that's why we have a chunk for A, B, A1, A, and B1. Yeah, and basically that would be a visual explanation of how chunks are created. In the source code there are a lot of smart things that have been done, and I would encourage you to try to explore that. It's very interesting. Yeah, and probably in a future video I will also take a look to the source code, because there are some very interesting things that I think need to be shown. Right, that would be it, and thank you for watching.